Grant Morrison has this funny quote about how kids and adults consume media differently. Kids will see Batman racing through the streets of Gotham, punching criminals and looking cool, and they'll just appreciate the story for what it is. Adults, meanwhile, are more likely to pause and ask questions like, wait, who pumps the tires on the Batmobile? In other words, kids are naturally better at suspension of disbelief. Now, everyone is capable of suspending their disbelief to some degree, otherwise you'd be watching a movie only to jump out from your seat, point at the screen and say, hey, wait a minute, this isn't Bob Dylan, this is actor Timothée Chalamet. Suspension of disbelief is what allows us to enjoy genres that are inherently unrealistic, sci-fi, fantasy, and of course, superhero stories. A guy who dresses as a bat, a guy who crawls up walls, and a guy who flies are not realistic. Not in the slightest. I don't care how drab and depressing you make them. And yet, superheroes have often been used to comment on very real-world problems. Superman was out here fighting corrupt labor unions as far back as the Golden Age, for example. The question is, when is it appropriate for superheroes to take on real-world issues? Should they even do it at all? Now, you can't even talk about this topic without bringing up Marvel's merry band of mutants, the X-Men. For decades, the X-Men were Marvel's flagship team. Their popularity came from cool powers, inventive storylines, memorable characters, and, at least partially, because of their ability to comment on real-world issues. Yes, when Stan Lee created the X-Men back in the 60s, he didn't really have this in mind, but it's been a part of their stories for so many decades that it's now baked into their DNA. Let me be clear about one thing though. I don't think the X-Men stand in for any one particular real-life group of people or community, and I think anybody who says otherwise doesn't know enough about the characters. No, the X-Men represent outsiders in general. If you've ever felt like you didn't belong somewhere for any reason, you can relate to these guys, and seeing as just about everybody on the planet has felt like an outsider at some point, it's no wonder why they're so beloved. The fact of the matter is, the X-Men's fight for mutants and humans to coexist peacefully is their version of power and responsibility. It's the main philosophical point that drives their stories. But more recently, X-Men comics have leaned heavily on storylines where the X-Men don't fight traditional supervillains, they fight humans. And more, the human villains aren't just prejudiced, they're maniacs, building extermination machines that wipe out several mutants at a time. And this has happened over and over again at this point. Now, this can be due to a lack of creativity from the writers who just keep rehashing the same old ideas, but it can also come from a desire to comment on real-world issues. The writers might feel like certain real-life groups are the victims of all-out attacks and extermination campaigns, and so they want to portray that in the comics. The problem is that when this kind of existential attack becomes the status quo, the dream of peaceful coexistence doesn't look noble anymore. It looks naive to the point of being self-destructive. In fact, it starts to make sense for mutants to retreat into isolation, which sends a very different message than the one the X-Men are supposed to embody. The social commentary the writers want to do flies in the face of what these characters are meant to stand for. And this shift has affected how fans engage with the stories too. Saying Magneto is a villain, for example, can spark heated arguments, with many people insisting that Magneto was right. Now, Old Mags is a compelling character in his own right, and his morality has shifted back and forth over time, so it's possible to have different interpretations of the character. The problem is that when the stories lose balance, when allegory becomes the only thing left, disagreement over a comic book villain starts feeling like a political argument, and the conversation gets overheated fast. Now, this problem goes beyond the X-Men, of course. Sometimes, when comics focus too much on real-world parallels, they start to undermine the very logic of their universes. Take Marvel's recent event, One World Under Doom, where Doctor Doom gains godlike powers. Again, for what, like the millionth time? Anyway, at one point he calls out the heroes for wasting their potential. Why is Ant-Man punching out bank robbers when his technology could end world hunger? Why don't the mutants just use their psychics to erase prejudice from human minds? It's an interesting point, but once it's raised, it's hard to ignore it. From now on, whenever the X-Men face another genocidal threat, and they will, I guarantee you they will, you can't help but ask yourself, Charles, why don't you just hop over to Cerebro and end this whole thing in like 5 minutes? In older stories, the answer was obvious, because the X-Men are superheroes and superheroes don't cross that line. But with modern comics pushing the characters into a place of distrusting humans and going further and further into moral gray areas, that answer doesn't hold anymore. And then there's the issue of preachiness. Heavy-handed social commentary can destroy a hero faster than any villain. Everyone likes to make fun of after-school specials where characters abruptly stop the plot to directly preach to the audience about how cool it is to be tolerant or how evil peer pressure is. Comics have fallen into this trap too. Dennis O'Neil's Green Lantern Green Arrow run is historically important, and O'Neil himself is a great writer. But man, you gotta admit that some parts of that run are rough. I mean, come on. Characters pause to lecture one another. Ollie calls Hal a fascist at basically every opportunity he has. Or how about in issue 1? The infamous scene where some guy walks up to Hal and pretty much asks him point blank, "So what have you done for black people lately?" The execution is so blunt it borders on parody. It also doesn't make any sense. Green Lantern has saved the planet a bunch of times. I think that counts. Also, I'm just gonna say it. Sometimes I don't want a deep analysis of society or the human psyche or whatever. Sometimes I just want a superhero stories where the heroes go on zany adventures and fight bad guys. There's literally nothing wrong with just wanting well-made light entertainment, and there's no need to shoehorn in social commentary where it doesn't belong. Going back to the X-Men again, in the past, they used to have a healthy balance of stories that commented on mutant-human relations, but they also had more traditional superhero stories where the gang fights dinosaurs, or visits alien planets, or does all sorts of cool stuff. The larger point here is not that superheroes should completely avoid real-world issues. Some of the best stories in the genre come from thoughtful social commentary. Keyword there being thoughtful. When done well, it deepens the story. When done poorly, it feels like a lecture in a spandex wrapper. Again, superheroes are inherently unrealistic. They're fantastical, and their first duty is to inspire, to make us believe in larger-than-life ideals. Social commentary should enhance that inspiration, not bury it under moralizing or break the fantasy entirely. So yes, superheroes can tackle real-world problems, but the key is balance, subtlety, and above all, good storytelling. Does this fit with the established universe where these characters live in? Does it fit with what they stand for as heroes? Is it subtle? Because if you reduce these characters to mouthpieces for political arguments, you end up asking questions as silly as who pumps the tires on the Batmobile. But hey, that's just my opinion. What do you guys think? Do you like it when superheroes tackle real-world issues? Or do you prefer for them to just stay in their own fantastical universes? Let me know in the comments. As usual, if you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And join me next time for a little celebration. With this YouTube channel hitting 100 subs, super thankful for that by the way, you guys rock, it's time to talk about the next movie in the Godzilla series, 1955's Godzilla Raids Again. See you there.